Hi.
My name's J.C. McCauley.
I'm Nyesha McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
All right, my friends, once again, it's indeed time to get our talk on. This morning, talk with me, your host, J.C. McCauley, and the champions of talk this morning. Talk champion, Jonathan Small, in the house. Morning, Jonathan. How you doing?
I'm doing fine, Stan. It's a pleasure to be back here again. Look forward to it, as I mentioned, every week. And, glad to be participant on this particular show with you.
It's always good to have you back here, Jonathan.
Yeah, I don't know if Stan, if the week go by slow or go by fast. It's kind of hard to really say. Sometimes it seems like it go by fast. Sometimes it's like it goes by slow. So when you're looking forward to something, it might be going by slow. When you got problems and you want to deal with it, it might be going by fast. I mean, that's just a psychological way of looking at it. But how was your weekend?
Weekend was good. It was a good weekend. I not really do too much. I think I tried to get some sleep. You know, I had I had to go to the dentist, and it's been like pain. So I wasn't getting any sleep. So finally, Sunday morning at 6 o'clock, I went and got some Oragel because I hadn't got sleeping for like 3 days.
That's not good.
Right. It only happened when you lay down. After 1 hour, my head felt like it was just going to explode. Like someone had an ice pick in the side of my head. But you press on.
Yeah, so it sounded like to me your dental issues was really causing you not to sleep.
Yes.
Okay. And that's why you sometimes can't take anything for granted. You know, something minor could end up being something big or major. So, I mean, yesterday, obviously, I don't know, it wasn't a rainy, cloudy, gloomy day. Saturday was a nice, bright, sunny day. So I don't know if that made you feel a little better one way or the other.
Saturday, Alliance meeting was in the meeting all day long. So I didn't get out of the house this weekend.
Okay.
So it didn't really matter whether it was gloomy or sunny.
Right.
I was inside.
Inside taking care of business.
Yeah.
Thanksgiving was pretty nice.
Yes, actually, it was good. Yeah. Every day's a great day for me. I can't speak for everybody else, but I have the philosophy of life where the day is what you make it.
But I mean, like, sometimes people for Thanksgiving plan big events. I just laid back and just cooked a small little dinner. Said I'm not even gonna stress myself trying to find somebody.
What'd you have?
I know I had macaroni, I had broccoli, and I had sardines. I didn't even have no meat.
Macaroni, sardines, no sweet potatoes?
No, it was just me doing a quick little cooking just to get through the day.
Get through the day. So no sleep coma after you got finished eating.
No. And the game was pretty nice watching the Cowboys play on Thanksgiving Day.
Yes, I'm sure you enjoyed that. I thought about you.
You thought about me.
Yeah, I did see that game. I forgot about that. Yeah, I saw that game. Yeah.
It's getting interesting. I mean, we're getting close to the crunch time. You want to be playing your best football after Thanksgiving going into December. Cowboys are looking pretty good, but, the San Francisco 49ers are looking real impressive. Haven't given up a touchdown in 4 straight games in the second half.
How about the Eagles?
The Eagles won last night.
Yes, I watched that.
They are still vulnerable, though. They're winning.
Because they're always vulnerable. When you're number one, you're always vulnerable. Everyone wants you to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
They could also continue with their winning streak.
December 24th, the Eagles and the Cowboys rematch. Keep that date in mind.
I will. I'll record it so that when you get here, I can show it to you.
Show it to me. In Dallas, though. I don't know if that's going to be a difference or not, though. Sometimes
the only thing that'll make it worse will be that the Cowboys will lose at home.
That'd be worse for me, yeah. You don't want to lose at home with a big showdown. But I know the media and the CBS or Fox 61 can't wait to get this game going. Could be playoff implications, division implications. Just don't know for sure. But anything could happen on any given Sunday. But
any given Sunday, anything can happen. That's what makes football such a great dynamic sport, and the drama of it all. But it is Monday, which means, of course, we have special guests joining us, and this Monday is no different than any other Monday. We always have the top-notch special guests, always somebody that knows, expert in their field, as I like to say. So take notes, my friends, because you will learn if you listen. So, Jonathan, you got the floor, my brother.
All right, good morning to people out there on Morning Talk Live with J. Stan McCauley Talk Show. We have a returning guest to to Morning Talk Live with J. Stan McCauley Talk Show. We have the privilege of having him on twice, and now this is the third time. This is a veteran in the music entertainment industry. He is a key player in many different levels of entertainment, and again, we have a lot to really address with his role in a particular major company. The guest this morning is the general manager, vice president of Hush Productions Management Company. He is also classified as a film producer, no other than Kevin Harewood. Good morning, Kevin. How are you doing?
Good morning. Good morning to you both. I want to correct you. I'm a former general manager of Hush Productions. That is a history both to me and to the music world. And I'm a current producer and founder of Eclectic Entertainment and Indie Streets Filmworks, and a partner in a company called Comedy Collaborate, which produces comedy specials. So we're here to talk about the past. But before we go there, I just want to bring up a point. You guys were discussing the Cowboys. This may be, I'm a Giant fan, so our Giants are doing better than was expected at the beginning of the season, but
Absolutely.
We lost the Cowboys.
Mm-hmm.
But here's an idea for future discussion, if not later discussion today. But I wonder if you guys are aware of the photograph that's been floating around and verified of Jerry Jones when he was in high school, and he was part of a crowd, I'll be nice and not call it a mob, that was at Little Rock High School, North Little Rock High School, that gathered to stop the black students coming in when desegregation was put in. And wondering, being that is part of his history, if there should be some sort of sanction the way they held Kyrie Irving out on a plank. And I'll leave it at that, and we'll go discuss some music. But it's something I think that should be looked into.
Yeah, I am aware of that. I did look at that tape or that picture, and then Stephen A. Smith of First Take, who's good friends with Jerry Jones, was also discussing it. It would take too long to really give a good, I guess, explanation in Stephen A. Smith's opinion to really get into it. But I think Stephen A. Smith was kind of appalled by the outlash because he was 14 years old. He was just there. He wasn't, you don't have no documentations of what he was doing, what he was actually blocking kids or something like that. You know, he said now, Jerry Jones said he was just curious. It was like curiosity why he was there.
Okay. So let me just say this. Okay. And again, this is not the topic.
Right.
I went to one of the most racist high schools in New York City when I went to high school. There was at the time in the 70s, when I went to high school, and really stranger from the late 60s, in Brooklyn, New York, there was no co-educational high school in central, that had space in central Brooklyn. So in Bedford-Stuyvesant, there was no co-educational high school. So if you wanted to go to a school that had girls, or if you were a young lady, you wanted to go to school that had boys, you had to go outside of your neighborhood to go to those schools. And they would give you several choices of schools. Like I think you could choose from either 4 or 5 schools, and you basically had to take, you were bused, even though for the most part it wasn't like you was on a school bus. You was on public transportation to go to those schools. The school that I went to, New Utrecht High School, which was ironically the school that is shown in the opening scene of the TV show Welcome Back, Kotter, was a school that was predominantly Italian kids, as was adjoining school Lafayette, as was the school that Stephon Marbury and people like that have later made famous. That's the school that he got game was shot in. Lincoln was a little bit more mixed, but still predominant. And they were very physically racist. And the crowds that we had crowds similar to what was shown in that photograph. And when somebody was there was nobody that was just there. Okay. That is because either you're a part of it or you're not. Like there were I could say that for those white kids that lived in that neighborhood, there were pressures for some of them to be there, but they chose to be there. They weren't not there. And I know of one situation when we went to school where one Italian kid who chose not to be there got painted as one who, and I won't be graphic, was a Black person lover. It was more graphic that said, and they literally beat him up and put him in the hospital. There was also, you may have heard of the Yusef Hawkins situation. That there's a wonderful documentary that came on last year about where in 1989 the young man got killed going by a car because they thought he was coming to this party. That incident happened in the area where I went to high school at. And there were many of them that got arrested, even if they didn't, or at least investigated, even if they didn't hit anybody because they were there. So Jerry Jones' explanation, it don't fly. That's not, I've been in many of those situations. That's not how it goes down. But enough of that. We already talked about that more than I expected to by bringing it up. I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's all right.
Okay.
But I think it's something that is interesting. And as a Cowboy fan, you should at least look at come up with an opinion that's not Stephen A's, but yours.
Well, okay, and I will give my opinion as the end of the show, just to give you my side of it. But obviously, usually I would ask my guests to give their brief background on, your title or, your background. But clearly we covered enough time now. I want to get into the particular topic.
Right.
But again, your role with Hush Productions Management Company was the former general manager, vice president. How did that whole?
Yes. Yeah. I was essentially chief operating officer.
Chief operating officer.
And vice president, general manager, of the company. Which was a predominant Black, originally music management company that spread into other things in the 80s. That brought people like Freddie Jackson and Kashif, Melba Moore, Najee, Alex Boyom, Force MDs, Boogie Boys, Melissa Morgan, Paul Lawrence, on and on and on.
Was the company kind of instrumental in establishing a new type of R&B sound, different maybe than previous R&B sounds during that time span?
Well, I would. We were instrumental in popularizing it. When Kashif and Paul Lawrence Jones were originally part of a team called Mighty Three with a gentleman named Maury Brown. And Kashif was really a techno geek. He was in computers before anybody else, before most people were into computers and things of that nature, and using computers in music. Paul and Kashif were of similar minds. And they, Kashif, had come up in BT Express as a youth, but his entree as being the Kashif that the world came to know as a producer and a solo artist happened. He wrote a song called I'm in Love that brought Evelyn King kind of back in 1981. And it was largely, the basis of that song was that he was essentially a one-man band and used drum machines and synthesizers, one being the OB8, I think it was Oberheim, mute bass, keyboard bass sound, and that triggered a lot of what came afterwards and a lot of the music that we put out on Hush Productions. So that also triggered Bo Huggins seeking Kashif out to produce Melba Moore, and then that germinated into what people know as Hush history.
And also, what Hush Production Management Company, not only was it kind of special in taking talented artists and, you know, obviously maybe improving their careers like Evelyn Champagne King, as you had mentioned, but also taking newcomers like you mentioned, Freddie Jackson, and making him one of the top R&B stars in the 80s. So what was the secret behind Hush Production Management Company being able to make an artist better than previously, but also take an artist pretty much unknown and getting them the best type of sound, the best type of look and everything to make them very successful?
Okay, so you had initially, like I said, a cadre of, largely initially, Kashif and Paul Lawrence were extremely talented and young at themselves at the time, but you know, coming to prominence on a national, international level, and really good at their craft and having hits that were produced on artists outside of Hush Productions and inside Hush Productions at that time, only Melba Moore, which was the thing that kind of created the marriage. Kashif's production of Melba Moore also kind of is what was the path that actually introduced me to the Huggins brothers. And then, you know, we went from there. After that, I think it was the ability to identify talent, most of the talent coming from the New York area. The fact that originally Kashif and Paul were hot, and then Hush became hot, so that after a point, people who were aspiring would often germinate to our office and our venue at 231 West 58th Street in Midtown Manhattan. You know, just also being very serious about your work. One of the things that we did as we grew is we basically set up our management company. I had actually previously worked at labels, starting working at labels when I was in college. I worked at A&M Records and then at Arista Records. So I'd had a viewpoint and exposure to management companies and opinions on what management companies I thought were good and what management companies I felt weren't good, and seeing careers that didn't get to where they, in my opinion, should have been because of management that wasn't as good. And I had that experience. When I worked at record companies, I was rare for a Black person in that I didn't just work in the Black department. So I saw rock groups, good management. D. Anthony managed Peter Frampton. Peter Rudge managed the Rolling Stones and Leonard Skinner. And I had worked with them. And at Quincy Jones operation, I had worked with an A&M. So I had seen how Quincy and Ed Eckstein worked. There was a company called Tent Makers that managed Jeff LTD and then Jeffrey Osborne. I had seen how they worked. And Miles Copeland managed the Police. and I had seen how they worked. And then I had seen other companies we won't name that didn't work that well. So I had some exposure to how management should operate. And we built our company to where everything that a record company, every department that a record company could do, we had somebody at Hush Productions who could at least do similar things. So if we were not the priority, like Freddie Jackson was not a priority when Rock Me Tonight came out. But we had the wherewithal to get those records to a certain place. And then once we got them to a certain place, we knew the label was going to kick in. And then, bam, like with Freddie Jackson's Rock Me Tonight was one of the fastest rising songs, if not the fastest rising song I've ever been involved in. Basically, it was like when Freddie went to the studio to make that record, he didn't even have a record deal, right?
Right.
And we put him in the studio. It was Charles Huggins' idea to put him in the studio. Went in the studio. He went in the studio making that album with Barry Eastman, with other songs, of which You Are My Lady was one of those songs. And then at the end, Paul Lawrence comes in. Paul Lawrence is the one who grew up with Freddie and in the music in the New York uptown Harlem scene. Paul came in, gave Rock Me Tonight. It was like he was the home run hitter that came in. He was Aaron Judge, and Rock Me Tonight hit. But Freddie was not a priority. You had Frankie Beverly and Mays. You had Ashford and Simpson was signed to Capitol. You had Tina Turner, and Freddie Jackson comes out and it's like, oh, we're putting out this Freddie Jackson record. Well, we got it to a certain point quickly, and bang, double platinum on his first album. So. That's part of the secret was the creativity and the creativity in marketing in-house and relating with the record labels.
Kevin, I don't know if this is a comparison, but it might be a comparison. Actually, when you look at the time span that Hush Production Management Company was established or really growing, it looked like it came along about the same time that BET, Black Entertainment Television, came along. And I say that to say the relevancy of it is that if you was an up and coming artist, particularly a black artist or R&B artist in particular, and you wanted some exposure, getting on BET was very helpful. I mean, it was not the only market. I guess if you got on Johnny Carson's show and things like that, you would be another way to get exposure. But even BET was much more easier to get your videos and airplay than MTV. And was Hush Production Management Company an easier company to give an upcoming artist an opportunity to sign with, or was it very difficult to be able to get yourself connected with Hush Productions or Management Company?
You said a lot.
Okay.
I would say that, so the timeline of BT is close to the timeline of the peak or the rise of Hush Productions. I would say BT's a little bit behind, but it's definitely instrumental, definitely a synergistic relationship. Music video was just in its beginning form. And actually, I was the person at Hush Productions that oversaw most of the video production, which is actually kind of one of the things that helped me go into film production and television production. And I was actually close. I don't know if you know the magazine Sister to Sister. That was a very popular magazine for many years. That magazine was started by a woman, Jamie Foster Brown. And Jamie Foster Brown was actually the producer of BT's most popular show, Donnie Simpson's Video Soul. Donnie Simpson was a popular DJ in the Washington, D.C. area. BT existed before that show, but those shows, Video Soul and Planet Soul and stuff like that, is what really put BT out there when they went, and definitely it was easier to get a a music video on BT than it was to get on MTV, because MTV wasn't playing black artists before Michael Jackson, and then still was very limited for several years. Now, in terms of the ability to get artists signed, we didn't take anybody, so we figured out talent that we wanted to work with, and then we nurture and work with them. It became easier for us as we became more successful to get people signed to labels. So, for instance, like I said, Kashif was signed to Arista because of his production prowess and his talents. They recognized a gentleman by the name of Jerry Griffith, who also was the same person that brought Arista Whitney Houston later, recognized Kashif's talents not only as a producer but as an artist, and brought Kashif to Arista. As I mentioned, Freddie Jackson, when we put him in the studio for the album that became Rock Me Tonight, his debut album, he didn't have a record deal. Okay. He later got one because we had a relationship with Capitol. A gentleman by the name of Varnell Johnson was an A&R. And because Melba was on Capitol, Melba was obviously, a big star from Broadway and television and had a record deal. The relationship with Capitol eventually made it where we had an end, through Melba made it where we had an end that eventually got Freddie signed, even though he wasn't signed at the time we started recording that album. Most of the executives at Capitol, actually, the executive at Capitol never even met Freddie. He was almost gold with Rock Me Tonight before they even met him. And then as we went along, because of Freddie, it was easy to get Melissa Morgan signed and Najee signed and so on, and Lilo Thomas, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, like a domino effect almost when you
exactly. Once you get hot, people come after you. So then we got so hot that we ended up had Kashif was in the Arista family. Lilo, Melba, Freddie, Melissa were in the Capitol Records family. At one point, Capitol gave us a deal, Orpheus Productions, where we could basically just put artists on Capitol almost sight unseen. Najee, Capitol had a family, a sister label, EMI. Capitol was actually owned by EMI Corporation, but there was actual label, EMI, that Najee came to the world through EMI. We signed and worked with a resurgence of the group Ray Goodman and Brown, formerly known as The Moments. They were on EMI. We had Force MDs were on Tommy Boy, so that the Force MDs had a record out, Itching for a Scratch, which we weren't involved with. And then when they went to make their second record, their second album, and also that included the song Tender Love, which was the love theme from the film Crush Groove. So they were signed to Tommy Boy, and then Tommy Boy eventually went into a merger with Warner Brothers. So Force MDs were on, we were on Tommy Boy and Warner Brothers. And Tender Love was Terry Lewis and Jimmy Jam's first top 10 pop hit, crossover hit. And then we had other artists on other labels, Polygram and at one point we managed McFadden Whitehead, so John Whitehead put out an album on Polygram. Actually, there was a group that we had that never came out that was signed to Polygram that included a young R. Kelly. I forget the name of the group. It wasn't, but it was a precursor to the public announcement. Because if you remember, R. Kelly first came out on Jive as R. Kelly in the public announcement. So this was a precursor of that, which was brought to us by a producer that we managed, Daryl Duncan, who was a Irvin Almo artist and signed to Motown himself, actually.
Stan, let me kind of bring you into this conversation. I know you have a love for music. And first of all, I would say, as me and Kevin were speaking off of the air, if you're under 45, you may not even remember much about, unless you really follow old school R&B, like Freddie Jackson, Evelyn Champagne King, Stephanie Mills. And I know some of the artists you like. I know Sade is one of your artists. That's one of your favorite ones. But you have any questions or comments you want to add to this conversation about the?
Well, I'm listening. It's it's always fascinating history, but particularly about Hush Productions because of my friendship with Ronnie. So
right,
it's fascinating to hear big pieces of puzzle that you don't know come together.
Right.
But I hope you're not suggesting that I'm under 45.
No. I think I'm not under 45. So I know you can't be under. I'm not under 45. I'm just saying for the people out there listening.
Push me back like 20 years,
I wish you.
It's interesting you mentioned Ronnie, formerly Ronnie Harris, now Ronnie Song, or known as Ronnie Song. And Ronnie, ironically, I knew his music before I was even joined with the Huggins brothers. Through the song he did for a group called Xavier, Work That Sucker to Death.
Oh, yeah. One of my favorite songs.
Actually, ironically, my ex-wife's cousin-in-law was the road manager for that group. And I was living in Atlanta at the time. And they came through. And that's how I first heard of Ronnie Harris. Ronnie is almost the embodiment of kind of like Hush. Because Ronnie is one of the most talented people that you'll ever meet in your life, and has done amazing output. Ronnie produced much of Najee's first couple of albums. He had other people that he worked with, some of whom, in my opinion, should have blown up that didn't blow up. John White, Scott White. He produced, songs on Melba and Alex Pognon and just a plethora of great material to this day. He has a song he produced on Melba that's making noise right now as we speak. And my favorite Ronnie song production is a song that is an album that most secular people won't know, but he did on a gospel group called Kingdom.
Oh yeah.
And that is utter Earth, Wind and Fire level brilliance.
Absolutely.
On that Kingdom album that he produced. I mean, just amazing music. I mean, truly just a nice brother and one of y'all Western Connecticut kings and just amazing output.
Well, actually, I sent Ronnie a link to this morning's show. Something that's out of curiosity or just instinct said, let me just send Ronnie a link to this show.
Right,
I know he's on the West Coast, so he may not be watching it now, but hopefully later on. So, well, I didn't realize, to be honest, Stan, that Ronnie was connected to, I know he had some big connection to big artists, but I was not aware of his complete background until I actually met, to you kind of introduce, not him to me directly, but to the greater Hartford area. So I just was not, I don't know why I was not aware. Maybe I heard about him, I just wasn't paying attention.
You probably weren't paying attention. But the thing
he's a very understated person. I mean, it's like, I mean, he's just he's always been. I mean, he's done big things. He's not a self-promoting person.
Okay.
And just brilliant. I mean, he can do anything. You know, I mean, anything musically, he can do it. You know, I mean, because even if you look at Xavier worked that Sucker to Death, you almost couldn't get as far away from Najee as that. You know, I mean, that's like straight up George Clinton. I mean, I think was one of those funk groups on Capitol. I think he produced either Dayton or Sun. I think Dayton.
Dayton. He did produce Dayton.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And I mean, this is fun. I mean, you know the Midwest. You know, Ohio is known for funk. Ohio players, you know, stuff like that. And he could do it all. He could do it all. He could do it all.
Right. Definitely. Well, again, I mean, when you hear Hush Productions management company and the type of artists that they put out, even if they weren't directly involved, as you mentioned to me off of the air, Whitney Houston, Kenny G, they had some indirect collaboration with Hush Productions company. Could you kind of explain how that came about?
What happens is that, you know, we're managing Kashif and we're managing Paul Lawrence, among others. And basically, Kashif, you know, at one point became the go-to producer. Like if you were working on an album and you needed a hit in the R&B arena, Kashif was the person that you would go to for a period of time. Similar to, I mean, Leon Silvers was in that role, you know, at a point. Teddy Riley, Jammin' Lewis, Babyface in LA. I mean, that's just how it works, where you're making an album, you have a good album, and you need a smash. You need Aaron Judge, you know, Mike Trout, Pete Alonso, you know, to come up and give you a home run. You need, you know, Tom Brady or you know, Jackson or one of those guys, you know, to get you down the field. And when you're in that role, then people come at you. So essentially, Arista had, again, Kashif was signed to Arista as an artist, but it's even beyond that because other labels come at him that he wasn't signed to. But they had signed Whitney Houston. They knew they had a major talent with Whitney Houston, but they came to a point where they didn't feel they had a hit that was the right hit to lead off with. And Kashif had a team of writers that worked under him. One, the two most prominent was a young lady by the name of LaFarge Cope, we call Lala. And the other most prominent was a young brother by the name of Steve Horton. And Lala wrote You Give Good Love, which was the song that was Whitney Houston's first single. And Steve wrote a song for Kenny G called Hi, How You Doing? And Lala wrote Show Me, which is also Glenn Jones' biggest hit ever. Glenn Jones was signed to RCA. And then, you know, Paul Lawrence, Stephanie Mills was in a Valley. And Paul Lawrence wrote a song called Putting a Rush on You for her and produced Putting a Rush on You for her. So you become this magnet where people, you know, come to you because they need that hit, and come on, give us the hit. And in the case of Whitney, I mean, Whitney was a debut artist, hadn't come out, and Kenny G used to perform. Kenny G was part of Jeff Lorber's band, so that's what led him to get a record deal. But he had put out an album that wasn't successful by any stretch of the imagination. And then Hi, How You Doing? You know, people don't realize Kenny G's original success was actually in the Black community. Like, Kashif took him out on tour with him and everything.
Mm-hmm. But when you look at Hush Productions, the management side, and that's obviously the behind the scenes role that you played. Mm-hmm. It also branched out into film. It didn't just limit itself towards the middle or the end to just music. Wasn't there like a film component?
Exactly. What basically happened? So again, you're this successful magnet, and one thing I will say is if you, one thing about the music, the entertainment business in general, mm-hmm. if you're successful in one area or have enough success in one area, it becomes easier to make certain moves in other areas. Not guaranteed, but mm-hmm. easier. Mm-hmm. So what used to happen back then is that, ironic, we had a relationship with Nelson George. Nelson George has gone on to be a major author, both of fiction and nonfiction, and a filmmaker in his own right. At the time, he was the Black music editor at Billboard magazine, which is the #1 trade magazine of to this day in the music business. And so Nelson knew it. Nelson is the great networker, and kind of, people would come to him with things. So people like Spike Lee, Reggie Hudlin, people like that would come to Nelson. Nelson would introduce them to us. Actually, when I remember when She's Got It, Nelson took us to a screening, or invited us to a screening for She's Gotta Have It, when it was not finished and Spike didn't have any more money, and it was in basically the lab, had to film in hot because he couldn't pay him at that particular point, and introduced us to Reggie Hudlin before House Party. House Party at that point was a student, was like a 5-minute studio film that later became the film that we all know. So Nelson introduced us to a gentleman by the name of James Bond III. And James Bond had a script of a film that's become kind of like a cult classic, Death by Temptation. So we decided to do it, actually, as a low budget film. And so that was entry into film. We also, before that, you mentioned BT earlier, we had co-produced with BT one of the first, sometimes production is very simple if you make it simple, especially for TV. And we had produced one of the first, co-produced with BT, one of the first, if not the first, music special on BT, which was called Thanksgiving Dinner with the Hush Family, which was basically just Jamie and I getting together, Jamie Foster Brown, who I mentioned earlier. We have a table. We have our artists, Melissa Morgan, Melvin Moore, Freddie Jackson. I remember being there, maybe Lilo. I'm not sure. I don't remember if Lilo was there. No, actually, by the time Lilo probably wasn't there. But sitting around the table that we shot a few days before Thanksgiving, so it aired on Thanksgiving, with Donnie Simpson, and just talking about Thanksgiving and family and their music and so on and so forth. So those were kind of, how we jumped off into that area and doing that. And then we also had a publishing company, a music publishing company that for years would compete. It was a joint venture between us and Paul Lawrence, that where we signed other artists also. And for years that would compete and would end up at the Billboard's year end in the top 5 for music publishers with in the Black music arena. So we eventually sold that publishing company to MCA Music, which is now Universal. But you organically grow into other arenas.
Yeah, and I guess, Kevin, sometimes people say timing is everything, and I don't know if this would have been successful maybe 10 or 20 years before it was established. I don't know if it would have been as successful. I could kind of look into the fact that it looks like from an outside perspective, I'm not in the inside like you. The 90s New Jack style with Teddy Riley kind of maybe diminished some of the artists that was normally signing with Hush Production Management Company, or maybe it was not able to keep up with the new sound. If I'm correct or incorrect, definitely clarify that.
So yeah, I think that if we're gonna so let me address two things. One is in terms of, I don't know if it could happen before. It definitely, it not only could it have happened before, it did happen in some, maybe not the same way, but in some form of fashion. If you look at this, it's just, I mean, Solar had did certain things as a record label. Motown had did certain things as a record label. I mean, people had did things as record labels. It was not, it was a predominant thing, a thought that if I'm going to be successful, I need to go get a white manager, a powerful white manager, or a powerful white lawyer. That was definitely a prominent thing. And to think that between Hush and the way we did things, and then Rush and the way they did things, did lessen that, at least as it relates to management, did lessen that somewhat. There are still some people who feel that way, that if I'm going to be very successful, I got to get a white lawyer or a white manager. There's definitely some people. Now, in terms of the music, everything has a rise and a fall.
Right.
And I do feel, ironically, Teddy Riley, as one of the key things for our success was that Charles Huggins had the brilliance to know real estate. He had owned buildings. He had a very popular nightclub up in Harlem before all this time, and owned this building at 231 West 58th Street. So we was able to operate with not having to worry about how you're going to pay the rent to keep the doors open, because Charles owned this amazing building, right? That's integral that he had that vision, right? And at one point, one of the tenants was a guy named Gene Griffin, who went on as the manager and the production for Guy and Teddy Riley and people like that. People may have heard of Gene Griffin. And so Gene Griffin had Teddy Riley from when Teddy Riley was a teenager, right, in a group called Kids at Work. So it's ironic that Teddy was right in our midst and we didn't catch him like that.
Yeah.
And then, with both hip hop coming along in the late 80s, going into the 90s, and New Jack Swing, which are a little bit harder than what we was doing. And then the music, the merger of kind of like folks coming along that are now coming into their 20s that came up on hip hop, and even if they want R&B, they wanted it like that guy Keith Sweat sound was a little bit harder. The drums were programmed a little bit differently, and people were hearing things differently. The def, and then also I actually left. That's 1989 is when I left to go. Not saying this is, reasons, but certain things happened. Zach Vaz left to go to Motown. Zach worked in high-end art department, and I mentioned to you offline that he was the person that Russell Simmons called me up to ask, how do you mix R&B records? And then that led to Zach mixing Orange Juice Jones' The Rain for them. That's when I left to go to the William Morris Agency. And just a new musical sound took over. But it was good 8 to 10 year run.
That's what I was thinking about, that time span of the 80s, like you say, 8 to 10 year span. Yeah. And that was the era that, some people who had that love for that type of sound of music, I guess you could kind of classify it as R&B, but maybe updated version of R&B. I mean, Freddie Jackson, I think, brought kind of a new sound. Luther Vandross is, I mean, they both got excellent voices, but I don't know if that's a comparison or not. I mean, I don't know. Freddie Jackson might just have his own unique sound. What kind of makes Freddie Jackson?
There were differences. I mean, Luther was definitely an inspiration and, you know, I mean, you know, you're trying to go for chart position. You're trying to go for marketplace. So there's also some competition also, but you appreciate and you appreciate. So a lot of the session people and the background singers, both Luther and Freddie used some of the same people. I mean, Cindy Mizell was a background singer, prominent background singer around town. She left Freddie's show and went to Luther Vandross's show. One of Luther's closest friends, Fonzie Thornton, was a prominent background singer and had a solo deal on RCA on his own. He was also one of Kashif's closest friends at the time and was on a lot of the Kashif productions. You know, so, and New York was just a haven for musicians. I mean, there's a lot of good, the System, Change, Luther. I mean, there's a lot of good music coming out of the New York tri-state area, you know, Connecticut, Jersey at that particular time, with a lot of great musicians, you know, some who weren't even, I mean, they weren't a part of us, but we all respected and appreciated each other and hung out with each other. And then you had this sea of change with hip hop coming up big. But I mean, you know, it's like we hung out. I mean, you know, Andre Harrell, Russell, you know, we all used to hang out. At one point, we all used to you know, go to the same parties and go to the same health club and work out and whatever, you know.
Stan, again, I don't know if you have anything you want to ask, Kevin, or any comments you want to make again.
Once again, just listen because it's fascinating and it's just fascinating. You know, the rise and fall of all things. Everything has its season. It's like riding the wave. You know, if you surf, it's like, you know, you ride the wave as long as you can, and maybe you can catch another one. That's the business.
Yeah. If I could mention one thing real quick, which you were talking about certain things, and one of the things people don't realize is that Freddie Jackson, who did not come out to 1985, had more number one R&B chart, black chart records in Billboard than any artist the decade of the 80s. So that means he'd come out for half of the decade and had more number ones, which was initially led by Rock Me Tonight, and then You Are My Lady were the first two. That's more than Michael Jackson, more than Prince, more than Whitney Houston, more than Anita Baker, you know, in terms of number one records on the black chart. So one of the things that was unique at that particular time is we had success. You know, a lot of times it was felt that in order to be real successful, you had to cross over. Like Motown was popular amongst black folks and white folks. If you only popular amongst black folks, it was felt that it wasn't really that popular. But we were one of the first where it's like, look, if we dominate the black audience, that will be all right. And then that led to initially like Andre Harrell doing that with Uptown and just a whole other different, Vincent Davis doing it with Keith Sweat. So a whole other thing where you could define yourself. You did not have to try to make your music palatable to white folks.
Kevin, let me ask you this question. I had a love and still have a love for the British sound. In that time span of the 80s, you had Loose Ends, you had Soul to Soul, 5 Star. Was there ever any collaboration or any thought if none of those artists or groups was connected to Hush Production Management to say, reach out to them? I mean, I don't know your take personally, that you felt if they weren't signed that would have been a great opportunity. I mean, what's that whole take like?
Okay, so the Loose End situation and the Soul to Soul situations, 5 Star was on RCA. I'm actually familiar with the Loose Ends more intimately, Loose Ends and 5 Star, and actually am somewhat friendly with Jane Eugene today, actually, because Jane Eugene's her manager is a good friend of mine, David Lombard, who manages. He wasn't a manager then, but we talk. I've actually produced shows with Loose Ends in say maybe like the 4 years prior to because Jane lives in the U.S. now. Those groups, Loose Ends, Soul to Soul, 5 Star, they were signed to their labels, and they were signed to, like, Loose Ends was signed to MCA via MCA in England. Soul to Soul was signed to Virgin via Virgin in England. So by the time I became aware of them here, or we became aware of them, or most of us became aware of them in the States, they were already signed over in the UK. The way that the business worked, you could have groups that are signed, like you have labels that affiliate with labels here in America, but a label might sign somebody in their branch in another country. So for instance, after my Hush Production era, I was part of the team. We managed Les Nubian on the stateside aspect of managing Les Nubian. And Les Nubian was signed to Higher Octave Virgin here because they were initially signed to Higher Octave Virgin. They were signed to Virgin in France, and that's what gave Virgin worldwide rights to them. One thing that we did, because the artists that you mentioned are artists that are popular in the UK and maybe in Europe, that also became popular here in the States. Right. There are many artists that are popular over there that don't become as popular over here. Okay. And one of those artists in that time period was a woman named Jackie Graham. And Jackie Graham was signed to EMI label out of the UK. We actually picked up her record when, by this time we had a label, Orpheus Records, which was a joint venture with EMI. And when you have a situation like that, you have an artist assigned to one of the foreign companies, the American side can bid on getting the rights to release that in America, in North America. And we actually released Jackie Graham's record here in America. They ended up still not being dramatically successful, but we kind of did some of what you're talking about in that fashion.
Right. I know there were some artists that obviously, just saying for me on the outside, if I would have my choice to say this particular group or this particular singer would be a good fit for Hush Production Management Company with the sound that y'all present. And you mentioned about Jane Eugene of Loose Ends, that's her name?
Right.
And
right, yes, exactly.
I don't know if it's true or not, but I think there was some type of record collaboration, either a duet that they were supposed to do with the SOS band that never really came to be. I don't have all the details about that, but I will definitely research. But I know she kind of admired Loose Ends. I mean, she had admired the SOS band.
Right.
And I don't know the lead singer. I think her name is Mary, or the former.
Mary Davis was the lead singer.
Mary Davis, exactly. Yeah. And I think she kind of learned, or just really had that, admired her style or sound. Right. But what I'm saying is, would the SOS band have been a good fit for Hush Production Management Company with y'all sound and style, or that you don't think would have been?
Well, the SOS band actually predated us. Their success predated us. But I mean, I love the SOS band, both incarnations. Their Baby Take Your Time was produced by a guy named Sakiti, who actually I knew. That's SOS Band's from Atlanta. So part of, for a couple of years I lived in Atlanta, and that's when SOS Band was kind of starting with that. And then their real big hits, subsequent big hits, came with the production of Terry Lewis and Jimmy Jam under the Taboo label with Clarence Avant. So I would love to have worked with SOS and definitely. I mean, it did. One of the things, like, I'll say, like, when you're in music, you're a fan of music, so you appreciate other things, even for enjoyment, both from studying and for enjoyment. And Kashif and I both used to love the productions of Leon Silvers. So all that Shalimar, Dynasty, Solar stuff, Carrie Lucas, because she was very influenced by that music. And then later, Leon Silvers at Solar begot the Calloway Brothers with Midnight Star. And then the Calloway Brothers begot Babyface in LA with The Deal and this and the other. And at one point we even talked, we had several meetings with a then emerging Babyface in LA about them joining our team, our management team. It didn't happen. And sometimes I would joke, well, when I lived in LA, I would see Kenny and I would joke, oh, the best thing to happen to you is you didn't sign with us Productions. But, you just appreciate and network with those folks. One thing that's also funny, it's a funny tidbit. I know that your time is running down. After you mentioned Soul to Soul, and Soul to Soul, just a historical point, Soul to Soul in its heyday was managed by a guy named Don Taylor. And Don Taylor was the manager of Bar Marley at Bar Marley's Key Point. He was in the house and got shot when the people broke into Bar Marley's house and shot Bar Marley also. I mean, fortunately, they both survived. And Don Taylor also was Mickey Howard's manager when she started coming to the rise. So Jazzy, after, obviously, that first album over here was huge. And then I think they won a subsequent album, and they, they weren't longer working with Don Taylor. And the president of Virgin at that time was a guy named Phil Quadraro, who I had came up working with at A&M while we were both still in college. And so Jazzy's in New York looking for a manager. And Phil, recommended me, his After Hours production to be Jazzy's manager. So we set up this meeting in this afternoon. Well, that afternoon happens to be the same day the Rodney King verdict is told. So if you remember, or maybe, all across the country, there were either riots or the specter that riots may happen. Right? So I trekked to the city to meet with Jazzy. I go and we get introduced and get ready to start the meeting. And then all the office buildings in Midtown Manhattan have to close because they're thinking there's going to be a riot and they want the people to get out, go get home. So we never actually really had the meeting. So I had to manage him, but that's always a funny tidbit.
Well, keep in mind, and even Stan, me and Kevin, we talked about this. It's going to kind of be like a documentary of Hush Productions Management Company. So we're not going to be able to get everything in on this one particular show, but we're obviously working on bringing other artists who was part of Hush Production Management Company. Fabulous. And we feel that'll be a good documentary. But Kevin obviously brings a lot as an introduction to the first phase. And when Kevin was on earlier, we really didn't go too deep into Hush Production Management Company. I forgot exactly what we even talked about probably his background, his career in music. So it's like just the beginning of the first phase.
That's great. I mean, the building he was talking about, I remember going down there once with Ronnie. And you go up the long steps, you go in this hallway. It was like just like this waiting room that you could be in, and folk could go. They could move throughout the whole building. You never see them. They come out one door and then go back and then come in another door. That's as far as I got.
Yeah. No, it's fun. You talk about. I would give you an example of. Wow, that's an amazing description, because what happened? You're talking about the hallway. That's the waiting room.
Yeah.
You come up the stairs, and then you go through a door, and you be in the waiting room. There was a door to your left, a door in front of you, and a door to the right. Yeah. So the door to the right was actually my office, which was the biggest office in the front of the building. So I could look out my window and look at the 58th Street, right? The door right in front of you was to A&R administration, which where the gentleman I mentioned, Zach Vaz, was at. And then the door to the left, you actually went to a big room that had, like cubicles, where much of the staff was. And then if you went past that door, there was another door in the back, which was the big office where Charles Huggins was. And then Bo Huggins was downstairs on his own floor. It was a little fight room down there. And we had a little studio in the back down there too. To tell you how, this is another little tidbit that gives an idea of John. Stan basically just articulate the whole Hush vision, the whole Hush vibe of that particular time. Many people sat in that lobby trying to get seen, but trying to get pulled into one of those doors.
Right.
Okay. And one of the people used to sit there, or used to come there, was Tracy Camilla Johns, who was the actress that was in She's Gotta Have It. So that so she used to hang out with it was 3 of them that used to always, 4 of them that used to always hang out together. It was a crew of 4 women. Well, one of them is Gwen Quinn, who is gone on to be like a very prominent publicist, who was publicist for Aretha Franklin later in her career, and just was key in doing the first annual Jazz Awards that just happened in Atlanta, and on and on and on and on. Another person, the 2 other women were girlfriends of guys who worked at one of them, ended up Zach Vaz. One of them was Zach Vaz. And then the next person was Tracy Camilla Johns, who was an aspiring actress, but I didn't know she was an aspiring actress. And then she ended up being the lead in Spike Lee's pivotal film, and the one that jumped him off, She's Gotta Have It. So many people sat in that lobby. And that was a pretty
that was fast. It was like sitting. It's like the longer you sit out there, the more mystique happens, because you have no idea what's behind the doors.
Right.
And your mind wanders. It's like, they must have studios back there and the cafeteria. you have no idea how big it is, how small it is, but it's quite the.
There's so many stories.
Quite the thing.
Do you know? Do you guys know? I mean, I met you guys basically through Andrew Keaton.
Andrew Keaton, right?
Do you guys know Daryl Moss also?
I've heard of Daryl Moss.
So Daryl Moss works with Keaton doing I'm doing much stuff, but in particular the Springfield Soul Fest they do every summer. And Daryl, I met Daryl, later. But as it turns out, Daryl's cousin was one of our staff writers and an artist in her own right, Janice Dempsey, who I don't know where she lives now, but back then lived in Bridgeport. And Janice again was an artist and a songwriter and was among other people who sat in that lobby hoping to get pulled through that door, and you get pulled through that door and your life could change. And that's exactly how it happened.
Right. Kevin, we're out of time, but I got to ask you this question. Let's get your commentaries. I mean, recently the passing of Irene Cara, a world famous singer. And the one thing I just wanted to say before I get your opinion on her, briefly, life and background, whatever you know about her. If you took her two biggest hits, Fame and what's the other song? I Got a Feeling.
Flashdance.
Flashdance.
Yeah.
You could probably match those two songs with any of the biggest artists like Whitney Houston, Diana Ross. It was just such a Cloud 9 effect on how not just popular the songs was, but how talented those two songs in particular just stands out. I mean, I don't know. She was a good singer and great singer in other areas, but I just can't picture her without picturing those two songs to match.
Those are signature songs, yeah.
Signature songs. So whatever you know about, do you?
Okay, so first of all, Irene Cara was a young lady from the Bronx who, was a child star personality on the Electric Company, who went to what's now known as the LaGuardia School for Music and Art, which when we were coming up was just known as Music and Art. So many people come out of that school. I mean, it's just amazing. And those two songs you mentioned. I mean, Irene Cara is a rare person who won. She won a Grammy, and she won an Oscar. Either one solo is an amazing accomplishment, but to win both of them is a tremendous accomplishment. And unfortunately, from what I'm told, she ran into some legal issues. Where she sued a major entity, and then that kind of diminished some of the other aspects of what could have happened after that. But, just really passing way too young, only 63 years of age. And those two songs, like you mentioned, those are even beyond signature songs. We will be hearing those songs for many years to come. And the impact of people that in New York that either went to, that now go. I mean, I have young kids that I have a relationship with that graduated from LaGuardia School of Music and Art within the last 4 years. One of them actually just graduated from Berkeley. He graduated from music and art and then went to Berkeley and did what he had to do there. And then also there are other cities that didn't have those kinds of schools that now have those kinds of schools because of what they saw with Fame, what they saw with those songs, what they saw with Irene Cara, Debbie Allen from the TV show, and the whole nine. So the impact of Irene Cara is enormous.
Great way to end it on a somber but somewhat an uplifting note, to let people know about her legacy and how instrumental she were in a very short period of time to some degree. But again, it's a wrap, Kevin. I mean, it was a pleasure having you on this morning, and
always a pleasure to be with you guys.
Definitely,
always a pleasure to be with you.
And look forward to working on the documentary with you with other artists in the future.
All right, take care.
All right, see you later now.
All right,
bye now.
All right, bye. All right, great interview.
Yeah, he made it easy too for me. He just go with the flow with Kevin and everything. and was not even planned. I mean, to be honest, this just came about yesterday. You know, that's how things work. You're working on another guest, another topic.
Timing is everything.
Timing is everything. But you need somebody, and who better than Kevin Harewood? I mean, really, again, he's been very instrumental in helping me at times book other artists. I mean, book other guests, and guests like even Sheila Frazier. I couldn't get her on without his help. I don't know if you remember last year. Remember we had Sheila Frazier on.
That was a great interview.
And I was desperate to talk about Superfly, and who better to have than someone that is still living, that played in the movie. So the connections. But yeah, there's a lot of things I want to. Are we up on our break, Stan?
We're on the break. Let's take a short break. We'll come back and wrap it up and talk about what's on. What else is on your mind, John? All right, stick and stay. It's Morning Talk. We'll be right back.
Okay. Let me get up.
How do you define evil? Is it the pedophile school administrator or taxation without representation? Is it the gatekeeping community leaders who sell out the very people they are fighting for? Or is evil the politician that puts out lies and takes in cash? However you may classify evil, having to choose the lesser of two evils still leaves you with evil. No wonder so many people don't vote. It's time for constituents to flip the script and leave the plantation of party politics and free your political mind.
Hi,
My name's J.C. McCauley.
I'm Nyesha McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
Morning Talk. All right. Welcome back. Jonathan Smalls here. Talk champion. Number one. Jonathan Small.
Well, Stan, obviously, I mean, there's a lot of things I would love to talk about, but due to time constraints, obviously, this is not going to be the show, but I do want to address a few topics.
We got a little time.
Yeah. I don't know if you ever thought about this, but you know my background as a professional phone caller.
Well, yes.
But if you want to know the history where it got started at, it goes back to WTIC.
Believe
it or not.
News Talk.
Well, actually, it was the Arnold Dean. He had a sports show.
Arnold Dean Sports Show. The Dean of Sports.
The Dean of Sports. So I was heavy into sports during that time span, going to high school, and I would always listen to his show. And then sometime I said, let me just give this show a call. He had an open format or any questions you wanted to ask. And I probably was calling his show maybe once a week at that time. Never forget, one of my teachers at Weaver heard me on I guess he heard me call in. And I remember to some degree he disagreed with what I had, what I was stating. I forgot exactly some sports related question or sports related commentaries. But in my house, I was raised really by my mother too, definitely. But my godparents was the one that I really hung around a lot towards television. And in my house, my godmother was always the WTIC Bob Steele was the show that she listened to. My godfather was WKND What's on Your Mind. So I never really called WKND in the 80s, believe it or not. It wasn't until the 90s. And the only time I called WTIC was the Arnold Dean sports program he had on. But sometime I wonder, Stanley, that building used to, I guess the radio station was in the Gold building. And I went there one time. There was like a ticket contest. I forgot exactly how you won tickets to a Marlon Starling fight. But I was able to win 2 tickets. And then me and my godfather, we went to the Civic Center to watch a Marlon Starling fight.
Okay.
But it was through Arnold Dean's sports show. But do you think, you're like a visionary, would that building still be a good fit for like a radio station, you think, or you don't know?
TIC?
TIC, the Gold building.
The Gold building. Oh, well, the Gold building is a great station for all. It's a great building for all kinds of things. You could put a radio station anywhere.
Anywhere, okay.
Yeah, it could be in a barn. It could be, the ambiance of the facility is more for business. Oddly enough, as we were talking at the end of the interview with Kevin, is the waiting room at Hush, this talent juggernaut, was at the top of the stairs. You came in and you waited at the top of the stairs. The room was about half as wide as this room.
All right.
And maybe as long. That was it.
Yeah.
And the doors were there. You came up the steps, through a door, and you were in the room. That was it. I imagine it might have been opulent on the other side of the doors, but if you didn't come through those doors, you have no idea and that was the room. That was the room where you waited.
Yeah.
And so for all intents and purposes, I would imagine for most people who came there, unless you were coming there to see someone specifically, you didn't go past those doors.
Oh, okay.
And they came and got you.
Yeah,
when I was there, I was sitting in that room for 6 hours.
Right.
I remember every element of the room except for where the plugs are, but I remember the room. And
bring back some memories, it sounds like.
Yeah, it was a very interesting experience. I'll leave it at that. Yeah.
Let me ask you another question, since while we're talking about WTIC radio, it would be viewed as the biggest radio station in Connecticut, or one of the biggest in New England. It's like the gold standard.
It's 50,000 watt flamethrower. The flamethrower.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's huge nationally. You don't have too many radio stations with that amount of watts.
No, you can't reach it nationally, but you can get TIC. It's a clear station. You could up and down the East Coast.
I've heard that. That,
especially at night.
Right. Well, you know me, Stan. Anytime I bring up something, I'm usually leading to something.
It's the king of leading questions.
Okay. And it would also appear that in Connecticut, for state administration level opportunities, would you say the governor, working for the governor administration, is the highest level that you can work for towards a state government
in
job?
terms of government?
Yes, for state government.
For government, period, in the state of Connecticut, I would imagine that the highest, the big positions are to be part of the governor's administration.
That's what I was asking you.
Yes.
Now, both seem like they would be hard. WTIC would be very selective. It would be hard to get into that. I believe Governor John Rowland had a radio show. Yeah, he had a talk show that he was on WTIC.
After his governorship.
Yeah. But the difference is, with Governor Lamont's administration, you have to be appointed. You don't really go apply for a job like that. He has to appoint you.
You might apply, but you for appointment jobs, they're generally political.
Political connection.
Yeah, they're political, or it's the nature of the enterprise. If you wanted, there's nothing stops anybody from applying for anything.
Yeah.
But the application isn't what get you the resume and application isn't what gets you the job. That's the point I'm making.
Okay, in those two areas. Would you like, because you're a visionary person, would you like to see a media outlet like WTIC Radio? Do you think it's possible that you could ever see another format, particularly in urban black media, like that in Connecticut, or you don't? It's just not that simple to really.
Well, liking to see is different than what would probably be.
Okay.
There isn't a market for that.
Okay.
There's just no market.
No market.
Now, could black, quote unquote, person of color, brown skin, could a black person from descendants of the captivity, because there's this big BIPOC brown notion that people talk about, but in that large group there's a very specific group whose ancestry descends to American slavery.
Okay.
Will someone like that ever be general manager of a 50,000 watt radio station in Hartford or in Connecticut? That could happen.
That could happen. Because
it's not about color, then it's about your capacity to do the job within the environment that is set up. So if you can there's nothing to stop anyone from getting there. But to set up and establish, how are you going to support it? Who's going to listen to it? Radio stations don't just set up camp and they're there. They grow organically. And they become or any broadcast, any media outlet grows organically. And the successful ones are the beneficiary of being in the right place at the right time all the time. So that what you wind up with is the people at the top. No one gets to the top because they started at the bottom and want to just get there. You have to pay your dues.
And I guess even with all that, it would have to be very competitive when you're talking about TIC 1080 radio. I think they've been around close to 100 years, or getting close to 100 years, and they are just well established as a giant in Connecticut and can rank probably throughout New England.
Yeah, they have the wattage to get the message out, which makes them number one, and they have great on-air talent and great programming. All media outlets are whatever their content is. So if you've got good content, you know how to manage that content and an ear and an eye for what's next and pull that in with your finger to the ground, ear to the ground. You can stay number one indefinitely. You just have to always be there. What happens is someone drops the baton and then someone runs past you. So it's a lot of different things that make you number one at anything.
Well, it's kind of trying to keep it light and keep it positive. 50-50 chance I might not be here next Monday. I got a personal thing I'm planning to take care of between Monday. So I don't know if you want to do a show or you just want to take the day off or do a repeat.
That's up to you, Jonathan. As long as you've been here, you've never missed a program. I don't think so. If you want to take a day off.
Well, I mean, yeah, but I'm saying, would you be interested? I know Senator Coleman is going to make his big announcement. Well, former Senator Coleman is going to make his press conference big announcement this Wednesday. I don't know if you want to consider having him as a guest. I'm not going to probably be here, but
right. Well, I'm sure he'll be a guest on one of the platforms, probably yours. At some point. It doesn't have to be this Monday.
Doesn't have to be this Monday. Okay, so I was just giving you that as a suggestion.
No. The network's going to cover his announcement, as it will anyone who wants coverage. I will cover your announcement. Yeah. Have done so in the past. I think it's a good public service.
Well, see, that's why I don't want to really speculate and saying until the press conference officially gets announced to find out more about what his intentions are to run for mayor of the city. I mean, there's no secret we got some major issues with public safety.
Absolutely.
And it would be unfair to say, okay, you have to resolve this problem. This is a problem that I
don't think it's unfair to say that. It may be unfair to expect it, but I think any constituent that has an issue that they perceive to be important, then it's important. And they should be able to make any kind of request they want. Now, whether or not the person running or in position can deliver, that's another subject. But no stupid questions, no stupid requests.
Well, I mean, to make this part of his agenda, that public safety, he needs to say, you have to reduce homicides. 38 comparable to New Haven at 10 is just unacceptable. Now, there's a lot of debates going on over the past week. I mean, I didn't even realize until you told me there was a homicide very close to this studio.
Yeah, on the corner.
The corner. And see, the thing about that, you might say, okay, it was a targeted attack, leave it at that. But anybody could have been walking. It was 28 rounds of gunshots, I believe, fired at that.
All kinds of people walk up and down that street.
Right. So
my kids walk up and down that street.
Your kids walk up, exactly.
My son goes past that street several times a day.
Right.
On that corner, right where folks, and state employees walk back and forth. And kids play over there in the parking lot all day and long. They ride their little bicycles and stuff like that.
Well, I think the two people killed on Blue Hills Avenue with the vehicle is drawing more attention than this incident.
Well, that's because it happened afterwards.
Okay.
Right. And it was a horrific accident.
That's what I heard. It was a very horrific accident. I didn't even realize. So, again, I mean, to put this type of, the mayor, he gave a statement. I believe I sent you a link. There's been a lot of arrests, he said. We've confiscated 300 illegal guns. These are personal disputes that we sometimes can't manage or predict, saying all of the political correct terminologies that you would somewhat expect. What's the plan that they are working on to try, other than, I guess, confiscating illegal guns? I mean, you could say.
Well, I'm sure that the mayor has a plan. I have said, as long as I've been on the air, I've been on the air for 40 years. The mayor has very little control over these things. And there's only so much that you can hold the mayor accountable for.
Right.
Until and unless he makes it something he says he's going to fix. And that's what changes things. So Pedro Salgado said these things. And they weren't good enough.
Right.
So they're not good enough now.
Well, the numbers don't match.
Well, the numbers are worse.
They're worse. I mean,
they're worse now. So if when Pedro was mayor and it was off the chain and the numbers were less, then the numbers being where they are now makes it worse. So,
well, that's true.
If you set the standard for getting into office, crime in Hartford, then you have failed.
Yeah.
That's not my standard. I didn't set the standard, because I've said over and over again that the mayor. But I mean, if you think they do, then you have to hold yourself to the same the same standard.
Well, you can't downplay it when he says shooting is down, or the police lieutenant will say shootings are down.
That has nothing to do with the
up.
number of homicides. That we're not talking about shootings. We're talking about homicides. And when it comes to shootings, over 161 people have been shot in the city. And what is that, down from 300? It doesn't matter.
Yeah. Well,
you're hungry, and we're talking about how many people got fed in East Hartford. That has nothing to do with your hunger.
Right.
It's to deflect.
Well, I mean, it could be somewhat of a complex matter. I believe there was also two young people also killed inside a building. I think this had to be the same week, because it was so many shootings taking place. I don't want to get one mixed up. The two people shot in this area, I don't think they were killed. But there was two other young people shot on their birthday. One of them had their birthday.
Yeah, in their house.
So they will tell you, well, look, this is a matter where someone enters. This is the police lieutenant spokesman does most of the press conferences. I forgot the guy's name, but
a homicide is a homicide.
Right. Well, if it's targeted, exactly the perpetrator knows who he's looking for. That's not a random homicide. That's just a homicide that someone is targeting someone, and that
it's not like some serial killer is loose running around and everyone is vulnerable. But that's not the issue. The issue is people are concerned about people dying and being shot, and the city is unsafe. So now they're trying to say, well, the city isn't unsafe. It's unsafe for certain people, but it's not unsafe for you. So since you're not part of the targeted audience, feel free to come into the city and shop.
Right.
Feel free to walk the streets and promenades and all this other stuff. Well, that's damage. That's crisis communications, damage control, if you will. But at the end of the day, as a public safety issue, anytime someone gets shot, you could be an innocent bystander.
Well, that's my purpose about the 28 rounds of gunfire fired off in the daytime, not even at night.
Or even in the house. It was targeted, but the bullets went through the wall and killed somebody in another room, or out the window and killed somebody on the street. So if you have people running around the city shooting at each other, that is a big, big problem. It's a public safety issue, and what's being done to address it, we don't know.
Well, I don't want to say, and I hate to sound off like this, because I know A.J. Johnson, he was very concerned with the two people killed on Blue Hills Avenue. He thought it was some children at first, but I think that's near school.
For the blind,
the blind,
they weren't
yes,
children.
They weren't, but some people thought at first that there might have been children crossing the street.
They were human beings.
They were human beings. And let's not just say, okay, our political leadership got to wait till now a child gets killed crossing the street or by a stray bullet to say enough is enough. We're going to now go out of our way to do. I'm not saying what they're doing or not, because I don't know what the state representatives, the people who represent this district, are really doing or planning. I'm not in that type of conversation mode with them. Other than maybe a sound bite, I may not know what they're talking about, what they're working on. I don't know what A.J. Johnson is working on with the representatives, if that's even the route or way to go. Maybe that's not even the way to go. Maybe working with your leadership in the political level. I mean, it's hard to say that that's not a good alternative to work with.
Well, I think people are understandably upset, but you have to be able to delineate, or what can be done with what you would like to have done relative to what you actually can do. There are speed limits in the city of Hartford. How much control does anyone have over some clown driving down Blue Hills Avenue at a high rate of speed? Right. What do you want to do?
Yeah.
What is the mayor supposed to do about that?
Well, a speed bump is just one.
You can't have speed bumps on Blue Hills Avenue.
It's too long a stretch.
You can't. You can't put speed bumps every every 15 feet.
Right.
You expect people to obey the law. When they don't, they need to be sanctioned. So there are ways to create an atmosphere where this kind of activity is seen as something I probably shouldn't do in this town. All right. You go to Bloomfield, people might not be so apt to speed. All right. But there's plenty of places in Bloomfield where people speed too.
Well, Cottage Grove Road, I mean, that's a long stretch where you
Right. I've gotten tickets on Cottage Grove Road.
Mm-hmm.
I've gotten pulled over by the police on Cottage Grove Road.
Right.
All right. So what is your traffic division doing? How many people do you assign to traffic? You know, Hartford has a diminished police presence because there's not enough officers. Mm-hmm. Then you have arguments that we have too many police and don't need police. What we don't need are police who are being rogue and not following the law. We need law enforcement people to provide a certain level of safety in the city. But if the police department had a public safety plan that everyone knew, bought into, was well publicized, then people could wrap their heads around all these things. There's things that people can do. But to just react because we're sick and tired of this.
Yeah.
So what? They're sick and tired. Now, but and I don't say that to be callous. I mean, being sick and tired doesn't change anything. Because as I say, every time we have this conversation, next year, we will be having this conversation again. Because there isn't a whole lot that you can do as a reaction to this stuff.
Well, they're doing something in New Haven to keep the numbers at 10 homicides. I don't know the exact details. I think when I suggested something to Kevin saying, well, is it fair to blame the mayor and the police chief for the crime and public safety? He feels it is blame for them.
Kevin Brookman?
Yes, he said that they do deserve the blame because they
ultimately
are creating the atmosphere.
Right. Ultimately, but this is a complex. It's a machine that has many working parts, and all of the parts have to be in place and fine-tuned for it to run correctly. The machine needs a tune-up.
Okay. So you think if you take the right police chief and let's say for the benefit of the doubt, the right mayor and the traffic division component that you feel can be looked at, other alternatives that you can prevent to some degree some of the issues that the city is dealing with public safety. Maybe
you could mitigate a lot of what's going on if the attitude of all these, if there were some serious changes. We alluded to this. The African American Alliance alluded to this in a press conference. It's still widely available online. When we said that these things would happen. We were dismissed and relegated to the bottom of the row. All we can ask for is a voice. We had a voice. We were heard, and that's all you can do.
Right.
You can't make people in positions of power do stuff. We live in a representative republic. People get to vote for their leadership. They have the government they voted for. Now, this coming November in 2023, they'll have another shot. We'll see how well that works out. But there has to be a plan, and these things can be done. But more than we need a new police chief or a different mayor, we need constituents that will hold these people accountable.
Right.
We also need a better grade of constituent.
Right.
To do more than be upset. Because being upset don't change nothing.
Well, being upset might make you to take some actions that you didn't do previously. It might get you to a point that, I want to do something differently. I don't know if that's, again, going to solve anything. When you're having issues with public safety, and I know you don't like to just have meetings because you think it's beyond meetings, but is that something you've ever tried to reach out to the mayor, the police chief? Have you ever tried
I've reached out to them? Yes.
Okay. I mean, again, I understand, Stan, talking about things is not the solution. You rather hold people accountable, and if they're not doing their job adequately, have a mechanisms to get these people removed.
Beyond your willingness to request such, and I'm just one person out of 120,000. The people will speak at the next election.
Right.
If the mayor runs for re-election, if the mayor wins, then that means that the people by and large are satisfied.
Yeah.
And
well, I would certainly hope some changes happen before the next election. I would hope that people will not, and myself definitely included, not under this misconception of belief that I gotta wait till November.
You do, because the change isn't gonna come because people are mad. The change is a systemic restructuring, and that doesn't happen because people are mad.
Right.
How you approach youth, how you approach adults that are coming back into the system, other people that are at risk, how you mitigate conflict resolution, conflict transformation. All these things have to be baked into the process. The process that delivers safe city is broken.
It's broken.
It's not going to be fixed because folk is upset.
Right.
It's too late.
Yeah.
So someone has to be willing to make that change. It hasn't happened yet. There's no logical reason to believe that it's going to happen over the next 6 months. So people can be mad and hope for change, but hope for change does not change.
Well, again, I mean, simplistic as it sounds, and I know you don't look at it this way, I still feel better, or some degree, a little bit better, if I hear the mayor addressing something than ignoring it and not saying anything. Now, again, that may not be the answer you want to hear, Stan. You might not buy into that.
As long as you feel better, that's good. Because you're upset.
Well, you
want to feel better.
Well,
but we run out of time.
We run out of time. Okay, so not even feel better. Just know that he's concerned.
I'm glad he's concerned. There's no doubt he's concerned.
Okay.
He's concerned for myriad of reasons.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with being concerned. I don't want to be concerned. I want things to be better, really better, not just on the surface. We're out of time.
We're out of time. See you closing.
All right. Special thanks to our guests. We'll see you next time. Y'all have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.
My name is J. Stan McCauley, and I do business as Lightsource Productions. I provide professional services in the area of strategic video communications. First, what we do is we help you craft your message using what I call the rule of the 5 W's: who, what, when, where, and why. We do event documentation, content acquisition, full-scale productions, editing, and of course distribution through our social media television network. And with social media, video is more important now than it has ever been. Whether you're talking big business, small business, nonprofit, church, or just an individual. Let's say you plan you're planning an event, a wedding, whatever the case may be, but let's say a big event, but no video. And you spent all this time, all these hours to put this event on, and maybe 100, 200 people attend the event. But more important than that is that thousands could attend by watching it on social media. But of course, you don't think about this until after the event is over. You can't afford not to capture it for social media. And despite what people think, I am affordable. Give me a call. Let's plan your next video project and share it with the world on my social media television network. I promise you that you will have the attention of one person, me.